Hey everyone, and welcome to Brave Conversations. And today we have with us Helen Baker, and she is quite a unique person. I find her very insightful, very intuitive, and quite unique in what she does. So Helen is a visual marketer and designer who works on websites, campaigns, branding, social media, visual content with a human-centered focus. She works with clients who want to connect their message to the emotional needs of the market. So you see a lot of branding expert designers, but they're always just concerned about flashy designs, colors, and everything. But with Helen, she has a background in anthropology and human-centered design, so she understands how to create a message that touches the hearts of the people you want to reach out to and engage your audience. And she has her own campaign to prevent cervical cancer, which has been very successful and has been featured on BBC because it uses craftivism. I mean, this is like the first time I've ever heard of craftivism. Thanks to Helen, I know what it is now, but it influences people to change in a very creative way. So working with Helen, clients can optimize their time and resources on creating a message that touches the hearts of their audience. Brave Conversations is always about real people doing real things to create real change. And I find that this interview with Helen, I think, hopefully will help us understand how to create real change through the right way and the human-centered approach to design and branding. So welcome to the show, Helen.
Hi, Cynthia.
It's nice to have you here, and it's very interesting to see your side and how you use your skills to help people do their branding. When you look at branding and how it's done today, what do you think can be improved?
A few different things. Lots of businesses tend to focus on what they do and what they can bring to the customer, but really I think the focus should be on how the customers are feeling. I think businesses should constantly be researching what their audience are thinking, what their audience are feeling, and really using feedback as a kind of secret sauce to get into the hearts and minds of their audience, to work out how they can improve their business, how they can improve what they're offering, how they can innovate. It's all about problem solving, and human-centered design provides a creative solution-based way of working for these businesses.
Yeah, so when you approach a project, right? There's something about you. Usually when I meet designers, they're all very flashy, they're very outgoing and everything. You're very quiet. You're, the only reason she's speaking now is because I'm asking her questions, by the way. But she is very introverted. And for many people, that could be seen like a weakness, right? I mean, like, oh, you're not as flashy, you're not. But what is it that you do that? How do you intuitively understand a customer's needs and emotions? How do you go about that research? Because you may not even come from that industry. So tell me what your process is.
The number one rule is to listen, but to listen really well, because often there are clues in all the touch points that you have with customers that can give you insights that can help you gain that specific information. So one of the things I work on with businesses is to look at the feedback that they're getting from their customers, to look at the language that they're using, because that gives real insights into how they're feeling. A lot of people, when they give reviews or testimonials, they'll use very emotive language, and that is key, I think, for working out how your customers are feeling. And I work with businesses to work out how their customers are feeling before they use their services or their products, and then the transformation that company brings to them, and how they feel afterwards. So it's really looking at the emotions both before and after, and that journey of transformation that the customer goes on.
Let's get it down to a more concrete level with an example. You've done a very good job with a cervical cancer campaign. And as we know, with a lot of campaigns, there's a lot of flash, there's a lot of, launching events and everything, but very few of them actually create change. And we were talking about brave change, brave leadership going forward. Tell us more about that cervical cancer campaign and how you use the emotive approach to get people to take real action. Can you just take us back to the basics? Because it's probably easier to have an example.
Yeah, it's good to have an example. And for me, it was when I heard in the media that rates for cervical screening, or smear testing as it's often known, were over at an all-time low, basically. Over 20 years since the NHS screening programme has been around, attendance figures were at an all-time low and decreasing. And I thought there must be something in this. Why is this happening? And as a human-centered designer, I'm always curious. I'm always digging for answers. And I love the sort of what if questions that design and problems bring up. So it's what if, and here is where I think you can be really creative and think outside the box and just think, you know, what if I designed some sort of campaign that, rather than addressing the women who are attending by sort of scaremongering and saying this could happen and this many million women miss their appointments, it's more just tapping into how they're feeling emotionally. So I wanted to create an emotionally led campaign that reached the hearts of women or anyone with a cervix, to make them act in some way that might change their mind, that might make them book their appointment, that could go on to potentially them saving their lives, which is, you know, such a worthwhile campaign to work on. So I looked at the current marketing materials that were out there and just felt that it was a lot of, sort of telling off, kind of big finger, you know, wagging, telling off kind of perspective from a lot of medical organisations. But I wanted to come at it from a human perspective and saying, I understand how you feel. You know, these screens aren't a pleasant thing to go through, to experience, but they're potentially life-saving, and they prevent 75% of cases of cervical cancer from developing. You know, they're key. They save 5,000 lives every year. So I just wanted the message to get out there in a very human-centered, emotionally aware and empathetic way. So I, after having looked at all the research, you know, I did my investigation, I did my digging, I interviewed women of the particular age demographic that I was looking at, and that was the 25 to 29-year-olds in particular, because the national figures are that 1 in 4 women are skipping appointments. That increases to 1 in 3 in women aged 25 to 29. So when I carried out my one-to-one interviews, I looked at women in that age demographic, and I asked them just questions. We had conversations, you know, over a cup of tea, just being human to human, you know, without being kind of scientific and sterile with a clipboard. It's just kind of me wanting to get inside their heads and their hearts, wanting to know why are they not attending appointments. And both my research and the research from Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust, that's the UK cervical cancer charity, both identified body image and body embarrassment as the key factors that are stopping women attending appointments.
So
So all
they don't want to make an appointment because they have to undress and they've got to do that, and they don't want to do that in front of people. Well, that's interesting.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. And, you know, it's getting undressed in front of a stranger. It's kind of being quite open and quite vulnerable in a sensitive area. There's a lot of issues. And I think more and more that, you know, with social media and with sort of fashion and things like that, there's a focus on the external body image, and we sort of forget about the importance of having internal body health. And so I just wanted to bring that kind of back up to the forefront, but in a sort of big sister approach, a supportive big sister, rather than, you know, coming from perhaps a medical group that was trying to get women to attend.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? When you do, well, I guess 2 schools of thought. People say that when you're trying to get a medical message out, get a doctor,
Yeah.
white jacket, white lab coat, do that little finger wagging thing, make sure he or she looks very serious, old preferably, with a stethoscope, and there you go.
Yeah.
But then you're saying that actually it doesn't work. That's scaremongering, or maybe it does work for some people. For the majority of people, especially with women with the sensitive area, sensitive kinds of concerns, do a big sister approach. How did that work? And how did you, so, okay, so what was the big sister approach?
Well, I first kind of got inspired by walking past a local beauty salon that had a sign hanging in the window saying, "How's your lady garden looking?" And I mean, it wanted to entice people in to come and have a wax or something, but I wanted to use the same kind of language. There's lots of ways into talking about a sensitive subject, humour, through language. And I thought I wanted to use the same sort of approach that people felt comfortable with, people could have a bit of a joke with, but it actually addressed a very serious topic. So I decided to use that as a kind of impetus. That language spoke to my target demographic, who go into beauty salons, who use, who have beauty treatments, who have hair removal. But I wanted to kind of spin it and saying, rather than having to be beach ready, we're all smear ready. So that was the name of the campaign. We are all smear ready. And the kind of we aspect is like a sisterhood thing. We're all in it together. It doesn't matter how your lady garden looks. We are all smear ready.
Well, that's good. We're all smear ready. It doesn't matter what your lady garden. That's, I think, a new word for me. For some reason, though, I have images of a wheelbarrow. But anyway, that's that's beside the point.
That's gardening.
That's gardening. Okay.
Yeah.
You had. I was looking at your website, and then I saw pictures of things like panties. You were decorating panties. I mean, where did that come from? And what was the point of doing that?
Well, being a kind of visual person, I wanted to create the campaign that translated online. And when I thought, where are my target demographic hanging out? Of course, they're hanging out on social media. So I wanted to translate everything I'd found out in the research into shareable, bite-size, easy to digest content for social media. So I created a series of infographics, and some of them used like the little embarrassed emoji symbol. People could instantly understand that I was addressing embarrassment as one of the barriers through using the embarrassment emoji, things like that. And I created top tips for going to a cervical screening. So you can take a friend in with you, you can listen to your own music, you can ask for a smaller speculum, all these things that might actually make going to a cervical screening less scary, less intimidating, and a bit more kind of open to people thinking, oh, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I've got some control over some elements of it.
I'm trying to look it up. I don't know if you've got the pictures of your little paper panty craftism thing, but I thought it was great. I mean, you actually made.
I've got some to hand. I can.
Yeah, you can show us. I want people to see this because I think it's great. Yeah.
Some here.
Yeah. So there you go.
Tiny ones.
Yeah, girls.
But the reason I've kind of got some of these flowers on the side there was to emphasize the lady garden and the kind of pubic hair, because that was one of the embarrassment issues that people had, that they thought they might have to go for a waxing before attending and to do all this kind of maintenance work. Whereas I was saying, you can go as you are, you're already ready to go. You don't have to have that. And actually, a waxing is arguably more painful to experience than the actual smear test or cervical screening itself. So I was just trying to kind of approach the subjects approach the issues and the barriers of having to do all this work beforehand through the little pants. And it was when I read a book last year called How to Be a Craftivist by Sarah Corbett, and she set up the Craftivist Collective, and she's been running as a craftivist for 10 years, that as soon as I read that book or started reading that book, I knew that in some way I wanted to involve craftivism. And just to kind of set the scene of what craftivism is, it's using craft and activism as a way to get a message across in a very gentle but effective way. So it's about long-lasting change. So it's through a very strategic approach. It's not just kind of crafting for craft's sake. It's actually inviting people to get together, to to craft something that takes time. You can't rush these things. I mean, this pair is hand stitched with the message on there.
Can you get that closer to the video, because I want people to see it. Look at that. So it's got little lacy designs. It's got little, I'm sorry if you're listening to this on a podcast, you should really go into the website and see this, but it's really cute. And these are what the participants are doing. And I guess when they're making these, they're educating themselves as well, that
Yeah,
it's okay to have your garden unwaxed.
yeah.
You know?
The amount of conversations that I've had about people's intimate areas is amazing. But people actually, when they're crafting, they're often so preoccupied with whatever they're crafting, and they're concentrating on the task in hand, that they're not making eye contact, which often breaks down these sort of walls of finding certain topics uncomfortable to talk about. So I found people opened up and shared very intimate stories with me, perhaps of experiences that they've had, you know, in the past, reasons or issues why they didn't want to attend cervical screening. And then, but actually through those conversations with other women in a very safe space, actually we talked about the importance of going, and people were sharing stories of like myself, who I've lost a friend to cervical cancer, and that was another reason that I wanted to start this campaign. I wanted to do something because, you know, 2 women die every day from cervical cancer, yet cervical screenings play a huge part in preventing these deaths. So I wanted to educate people in a way, and I've got a teaching background as well as my anthropology and design background. It's all these factors coming together, and because of the type of person I am, I embrace being an introvert. I think it's our kind of super secret strength, because we listen, we take things on board, and we empathize. We step into someone else's shoes and think, how are they feeling? What are the problems that we're coming up against, and how can we create a solution that fits those needs? So I see it as a very kind of creative approach to problem solving that can be applied to all different areas. And I just applied it in this example to the cervical screening campaign.
Well, it's also because you have the passion for it and you see it as your cause, and your friend's story actually probably amplifies that passion in you. And you know, when we're talking about this topic, it also applies to men, because men are married to women, men have daughters, and this is an interesting one, because the more we understand how psychologically how women make these decisions for themselves, the more I think also the men can be more supportive. And the
Yes.
scaremongering approach, I mean, I can imagine for myself, if I keep seeing commercials scaremongering me, you know, finger wagging me into doing these things, it actually puts a lot of pressure, more additional pressure. Now I'm scared and embarrassed. I'm still not going to go, but now I've got scared added to it. So it actually causes a higher level of stress. Whereas the big sister approach and the more craftivism approach, making it, it's very interesting. You know, people say, you know, when you want to have deep conversations, make sure there's the eye to eye contact. But sometimes when it's an embarrassing situation, distracting them with things that they're doing, you know, making those little
Yeah.
chants, and you know, I'm not really talking about it. It's kind of like I'm talking to myself about it, but other people
Yeah.
are listening, and there might be little giggles and anecdotes thrown into it. And you know, we girls doing it together as just girls, you know.
Yeah.
um Actually, I can imagine that could be quite comforting.
Definitely. And actually, you know, doing something like these craft, you know, getting together and using soft tactile fabrics is actually quite it's lovely to, you know, to feel. It's very sensitive, sensual in a way, but also it's kind of that collaborative, that supportive feeling that everyone's coming together. But and another important aspect of craftivism is where these, it's not just making these pants, it's where they go from then. So these pants were made primarily for National Cervical Screening Awareness Week, which happens every week in June. And in doing my research, I found that that week wasn't being celebrated by, or kind of talked about by, anyone. So I kind of decided to take ownership of that and use craftivism as the tool for getting that week talked about. So when people had made these pants, during the cervical screening awareness week, people dropped their pants in public somewhere where they might be seen. So again, kind of following on from your point about, you know, men and other people supporting those women around them, whether that's colleagues, aunties, sisters, mums, whoever, it's about encouraging conversation. So these pants have found themselves, you know, after people have made them, they stuck a label on there as well, which I'm not sure. So there's a label that kind of gets stuck on there. So people might read this label. It says, "We are all smear ready." It's a campaign to raise awareness of cervical screenings, encourage conversations and potentially save lives. Cervical screening rates are at an all-time low, but are the best protection against cervical cancer. The NHS cervical screening programme saves an estimated 5,000 lives every year. And these pants are a reminder that it doesn't matter what your lady garden looks like. These nurses have seen every variety. And then at the bottom it says, "These pants have been crafted with love by Helen." So there's a kind of name, there's a personal touch to it. People know that someone called Helen has crafted these pants, and then these would be stuck somewhere, perhaps on the back of a toilet door or a community notice board. I've seen them stuck on mannequins in a shop window. They even, a pair made it onto the Eurostar on the way to Brussels.
Oh,
They've been
wow.
even a pair went to Senegal in Africa. What I loved was that people in the craft community took this on as a project and kind of put their own stamp on things. So I had a chocolatier made some chocolate pants. A silk garment accessory maker made a tiny gorgeous pair of 3D silk pants. Children have got involved with their mums and have done, you know, their own version coloured in. I've got templates on my website that people can download and kind of use in with fabric or with card or with paper, with whatever materials they've got to hand, because this is also about being sustainable. It's not about buying new things for these sorts of projects. It's using up little scraps. They're only small, using up little scraps of what you've got. But it then puts a very visual, eye-catching thing out into the world, and people are interested, they're curious. And so rather than a poster saying, you know, this many people missed their appointment last year, or it cost the NHS this amount of money in missed appointments, a little pair of pants that you can see someone has spent time and energy and love creating, with a little information label on it as well that kind of gives the context and why it's there and what it's designed for. You know, a pair of pants like that could spark a conversation between a couple of women in a public toilet or bathroom, and just saying, "Have you had your smear test done recently? What was it like? Was it okay?" You know, and you never know what conversations might come up. So I saw it as a sort of conversation starter when these pants are out in the wild. And then I was that lovely kind of nature of people were seeing them and retweeting them and resharing them. So it wasn't necessarily the same person that posted them. Other people then saw them in public and were reposting them, which was what I hoped for, and it actually worked.
Interesting. When you were speaking, I was thinking, it's Father's Day. Father's Day is what, June?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Men are very good providers, and they want to provide, and they want to keep their families safe. And I wondered if that smear campaign could also be attached to Father's Day, and saying the best Father's Day gift is not chocolates or whatever, you know, for dads, but it's the assurance that the women in their lives are safe.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's actually getting the men on board with the craftism, and maybe getting them to make their version of what women
Yeah.
are like, and getting on board with that, because I think it's also important that cervical cancer is probably not something that men are aware of, you know.
No.
It's very touchy feely, you know. They may not even know that their women have been skipping them or are going to them. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it just to encourage conversation in any kind of area around cervical screening or bodies, or, you know, embarrassment, anything like that is just so useful, and helps to break down this myth that, you know, you have to have all this work done before you go, and maintenance work, and, you know, all this kind of terminology that might just be putting women off. And I think if women have supportive networks around them, then they're going to feel better about going. and just part of a sort of sisterhood that feels empowered. And one of the things I did as part of the campaign in January, it was Cervical Screening Prevention Week, and I wanted to do something to, with the campaign during this week. So I asked kind of followers of the campaign to suggest songs to make up playlists for people to listen to when they're going to a smear test. And so many different songs were suggested that I ended up coming up with 3 different playlists. One for relaxing music to listen to a smear test. One was funny songs to listen to when having a smear test. There was some quite interesting suggestions there. And another one was songs to feel empowered when having a smear test, because a lot of women said they felt empowered. They were taking charge of their health and their lives by going to have a cervical screening.
Interesting, very interesting. Let's take this back to other types of campaigns, because you work with organizations with their campaigns and also on a smaller project with their branding and everything like that. What advice can you give organizations who may want to create more impact in, well, actually you can argue that any type of branding is a campaign. Let's say you're a nutrition product and you want people to unjunk their cabinets or to live healthier lives. That's a campaign. I mean, I think more people should look at what they're trying to sell as a campaign rather than a product. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do.
Yeah. So taking it away from cervical cancer, what advice or methods do you think normal companies can use to make their message sound more like a campaign and create real change rather than just, I'm here to sell a product?
This is where I think the focus should be on empathy, and not just sort of coming up with like an avatar for their kind of ideal customer. It's actually getting into the feelings of those customers. So if you're a nutrition company, what do your customers want to feel, and how are they feeling at the moment, and how can you help them make that bridge from where they're currently feeling to where they want to feel, and use emotive language, use kind of examples that will make them feel the way they want to feel. And it's really trying to interview and do that research of as many people as possible, so you can look at the language, you can look at the color scheme, you can look at the font types, you can actually, every single bit of the kind of messaging that you're putting out there, it's doing its job, it's doing some part of the heavy lifting for you. So I think doing the research is a key part of that, whether that's the kind of current climate that we're in for nutrition, and what the focus is, whether that's sort of, a veganism shift or whatever, what's currently happening in this climate, and actually talking to individuals, not just sitting around a boardroom and guessing what your customers want. There's a kind of example of, I know the founder of Spanx has the women's kind of,
yes,
kind of,
Spanx is basically a rubbery thing that makes all women look slim and good before they put on a party dress.
Yeah, like a modern day corset sort of thing, exactly. But it holds everything
very
in.
Comfortable.
Yeah, very comfortable. And basically that was designed by a woman who wanted some sort of underwear that she was happy to wear underneath her white jeans and couldn't find anything that fit that bill. Then when she researched into it, she found that all women's underwear was designed by men, and they would just try it on a mannequin to see how it looked. They weren't actually, moving around in it. They weren't exercising. It's how we wear things, that give you the insight and that feedback to what needs changing or what needs innovating, what could be improved. It's that research, that level of testing that is sometimes missing, because people are assuming they know what their customer wants because they've done perhaps an avatar of their ideal customer. But it's testing it out in the real world. And one of the important points of human-centered design is when you come up with an idea, to do this rapid prototyping. You try and you come with what you think might be your solution, and you test it as quickly as you can out into the real world, get feedback from whoever you're testing it on, ask the participants, get that immediate feedback, make changes, you know, reiterate, refine, and test again and test again and test again. It's not kind of, here's my problem, this is what I think the solution is, then that's done, and kind of wash your hands of it. It's that evolution of innovation and feedback, and actually involving the customer or the user the whole way through, not just at the beginning when you think this is what my customer needs. They have to be part of the process. And I'm a firm believer in the kind of, I know it's Google's #1 principle, but focus on the user and all else will follow. And that's kind of key to human-centered design, because if you can design, whether it's a product or a service, if it's got your customer at the heart of it, and you can reach your customer through this kind of emotive language and an empathy-led approach, then the rest will follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. I mean, I'm getting a lot of insights from this, and I think a lot of people can benefit from what you're saying. You know, first of all, it's really to understand and empathize with your customers. Yeah, and what prevents companies from empathizing, in your experience?
I think some companies are scared of change, but the world is constantly changing out there, and businesses have to be innovative, and innovation can be scary. And things like empathy are sometimes hard. It's hard to find customers that you want to actually sit down and talk with, but actually most people are happy to do that. It's just people need to get out of their desk chair and go and interview people. It takes, you know, a certain level of effort. You can't always Google these things. So it takes, yeah, it does take some energy, and a lot of this isn't measurable. So, you know, it's risk. It feels sort of a bit scary, and there's a certain element of risk to be innovative, to put stuff out there, to change it, to reiterate again and again, when you want to sort of feel like, here's my project, or here's my solution to this problem, and kind of create a project around it, and everything's kind of listed, and it's all kind of tied up nicely. Often, you know, for real creative problem solving solutions, it's not one path to go on. It's a slightly more creative, haphazard journey. And I would really like businesses to be a bit more open to embracing that way of working, and to talk to people more, and get outside their companies, get outside their offices, and actually sit down with customers, or, you know, get them on the phone, and actually to talk to them and find out, you know, is there something we could be doing better? Because when companies get it right, their customers are ambassadors of them. They can't help but share how amazing these companies are. You know, they'll share them on social media, they'll share them with friends. They're like a walking, talking kind of advert for your business if you get it spot on. But if you don't get it right, again, you know, the flip side of that is that they will be all over social media saying how, you know, something didn't work and they were very frustrated by it, and they won't be shopping from there again. So, you know, you need to get your customers on board, make them part of your business, not just a sort of profile of your ideal customer, but it's actually understanding their emotions, and this kind of level of empathy that I think, you know, can really bring out some amazing benefits for companies.
I think they will be forced to do that with the COVID-19, because I think it's no longer about what the companies want to sell. It's about what customers want to buy.
Exactly.
So this whole incident is going to force us into empathy, because in as much as online businesses has been doing wonderful and great, but it also, some of them have been doing marketing in a very bad way. You know, meaning that, oh, great, we've got this button to click, so everybody's just going to be a button. Everybody's just going to be a number. Everybody's just going to be on this email blast list. And with automation, sometimes personalization and customization falls out the window, you know. And I think this COVID-19 is going to force us into being more personal, and maybe even, if we're not used to being personal with our clients, maybe just getting someone like you to sit down and listen to them. Because sometimes when companies do it themselves, they've got to have a behavioral change and a psychology change, when it's sometimes easier for you to just like, look, we need an emphatic
Mm.
strategy manager to just do it. And, oh, Helen, let's just do it,
Yeah.
because you've got that empathy within you. But how do you think the coronavirus is going to move companies into this phase? What do you think is going to happen because of this?
Well, I really hope there's a shift away from the focus of B2B, B2C, it's all that kind of terminology. It's human to human. You know, that's what we need to focus on. Rather than just seeing your business as a category. You know, my business only sells to other businesses. Well, actually, businesses are made up of humans. You know, customers are humans. Actually, it's the human element that we need to focus on here. So how are people's buying behaviors different in now compared to how they were before COVID-19? You know, people need to admit that things are changing and there is some instability, but if they talk to people, if they listen and look at what their customers are saying, then they'll get insights into how their behavior is changing, and the changes that they then need to make to adapt their business to go forward. So I really hope that the emphasis is on humans here.
I'm making a mental note right now and a physical note, H to H.
Yeah.
I think not B2C, not B2B, but
H to H.
because even B2B, it's still that purchasing person with a supplier person connecting with
Yeah.
each other, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if we can just convert all this B2B, B2C to H, I think we'll get it right. And that means we need to be more human in our approach as well, including listening to people.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think, you know, so many businesses just say kind of, this is who I am, this is what I do. But actually, you know, what you're designing your product or your service for people. So make it about people, make it accessible to people, make it, don't kind of focus on what you do, focus on the benefits you bring to your customer, and just make your company, you know, it's made up of humans. We're not robots. So we should be talking about our feelings, talking about how we feel, include that in our messaging and our marketing, and then just kind of people will feel understood, because ultimately we all just want to feel understood. We want.
Interesting. And I think, when I think of people being robotic and automation and, going a little bit overboard with all that, I think it's also, from my perspective, is based on fear of getting personal. Because when you get personal, oh my gosh, I'm vulnerable. You might actually give me bad feedback. You might actually tell me stuff I don't want to know. And stepping into the brave zone on this area is also going into be brave enough to talk to people. A
Yeah.
lot of people who have been brought up and with digitalization, with maybe the millennial generation, whatever, I don't even know what alphabet we're on right now, maybe Y, maybe Z, it's they are used to a lot of swiping around. And even the older generations, like my generation, we're finding it, oh, it's easy, isn't it, to just click a button. We don't have to talk to people, we'll just text them and email them. And that's actually coming, in my opinion, a lot from our own fears of connecting with people. And we'd rather be busy online rather than talking face to face. In my adventure moving to the UK, I've actually tracked down, I've spoken to over 70 people Zoom to Zoom or phone by phone, just to connect with them rather than having all these LinkedIn messages going all over the place. I've said one LinkedIn message, and then now I want to connect with you face to face, and or Zoom to Zoom, which has been, in my opinion, more enriching than trying to blast people emails.
Yeah.
So I love what you're doing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when you think of actually the language that we're all using, even in a digital way, the use of emojis can actually say so much about how we're emotionally feeling in a message. And, think about from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we experience so many emotions throughout the day. Why aren't we putting that into our messaging and into our businesses and into ourselves, and acknowledging we do feel differently at different times? And
Oh,
even
that's
just
not professional, Helen. Professional people don't use emojis. We use really long words with dashes in between.
Yeah. But I use emoji in my campaign, and it's talking to people. It's saying, yeah, look, you might feel embarrassed about this. Here's an embarrassment emoji. you understand that straight away because it's very visual, it's very clear to see, it's easy to understand. But, you know, even the fact that we have eyebrows, this is slightly off topic, kind of, but, you know, eyebrows are there because they help us express our emotions.
Yes.
That's their function. We need
Yeah.
them. That's why Zoom calls like this, you know, are more, we get more from them because we can see the feedback immediately from the other person's face, from their reactions. So, you know, emotions are such a big part of us, and we just need to get that more into business.
And I think, you know, if this were the new norm, we don't know when this is going to end. Maybe this is the new norm. Maybe this is how we hold meetings in the near
Mm,
future, like years, months and years to come. And there's no more limiting belief, in my opinion. Oh, you know, rapport building has to be face to face. You have no choice. And I remember
yeah.
when I started doing online communication with my clients and with my prospects, this was the days before Zoom calls. This was
Mm,
literally just an audio call, and I started picking up mood and emotions through tone of voice, body
yeah.
language through tone of voice. You can get really good at it if you practice. Now with Zoom and everything, oh my God, body language, yeah, no problem. You know,
Yeah.
face calibration, it's super easy.
Yeah.
But even back then, you can do it just with auditory. It's very interesting to speak to you, and we need to wrap this up. But I really want to thank you for spending time with me. And what you're saying, I think, is quite revolutionary in how we do branding and marketing. I like to end with 3 fun questions that I just ask randomly because I learned so much from them. So just to wrap it up, what do you think is the purpose of your life, Helen?
To make our world a better place to live in some way. I'm passionate about social change, and I love to do that through empathy-led marketing and design. So that's my way to make the world a better place in some way.
Empathy-led marketing and design.
Mhm.
That's really cool. And if you would change one thing, if you could change one thing about your life, past, present, or future, what would you change?
I think I would have started my entrepreneurial journey earlier than I did. I had a decade as a primary school teacher, which I loved aspects of, but I've loved my entrepreneurial journey even more because I've learned so much about myself. And I think I just wish I'd started that a little earlier. I'd still to have been a teacher, but maybe just not a decade of doing that.
Well, yeah. Well, from our previous conversations, I think your years as teaching and the other things that you were doing actually prepared you very well for what you're doing now. It's definitely
Probably.
prepared you for homeschooling very well,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
And the last one, what do you want to be remembered for?
I'd like to be remembered for bringing empathy into business.
Wow.
So, yeah, empathy-led marketing and design.
Very good. Thank you for teaching us about crafticism, empathy-led marketing and design, and thank you for bringing the H to H, human to human approach to everything that we do as a business. So again, Helen, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I wish you all the best in what you do.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Enjoy the next episode of Brave Conversations at the Brave Zone. But for now, thank you for joining us.